Hey, you're listening to the Give Back Podcast, a weekly podcast hosted by Give Something Back coaches, staff, alumni, and current students. Our mission is to support students from all backgrounds through the college journey. This season, we're focused on helping you thrive during your first semester at college, from your first day on campus all the way to winter break. Our fifth episode is called Adulting. In this episode, we'll discuss resources to have on speed dial, documents to have on hand at all times, and a guide on your first steps toward independence. As always, if you have any questions, give us a shout on Instagram, Facebook, or by email. Here are the time-coded sections for episode 5. Please feel free to jump around if you'd like, or you can listen all the way through. Enjoy!
So real quick, so obviously today we're going to be talking about adulting and kind of what that looks like and how to be an adult and how to start that path. So we'll do a quick round of introductions and get started today. So we'll start on this end.
I'm Chad Carr, and I've been an adult for 6 years. I work with Give Back in the finance and management. I do try to get out and spend time with youth as often as I possibly can, but for the most part, I'm in an office by myself. So
very adult-like.
Very adult.
I'm Lydia Matlock. I work for Give Something Back. I've been here about 7 years, and I work with our staff across the country as our Chief of Program Operations.
I'm Amanda Morris. I'm a success coach. I've been here for just a few months, and I've been an adult for probably just a few years.
She's our youngest adult.
My name is Shannon Labus, and I'm from Illinois, and I'm a student success coach, and I'm not sure I'm an adult yet.
Right.
Still
We'll see at the
figuring
end of
this
it out.
episode
Yeah.
if I feel like I am or not.
Right. So I think kind of that the fact that students want to be an adult, right? Like when you go to college, people anticipate you being an adult. They expect you to act like an adult, but you're 18. You know what I mean? Like you're just right off that cusp of high school. So I think knowing that the expectations that some people have you don't have to meet everyone's expectations, right? Like you have to meet your own personal expectations is probably a good place to start. Like kind of those first early adult things that we have to accomplish. So what are some of those that students should be prepared for as they enter college?
I think, again, just going back to everything we've been saying up until this point, different episodes of like, you're the one that's in charge of when you eat, when you sleep, how you study, when you study. It's all on you now. Right. And there's really, really no one. I mean, your grown up at home may call you and be like, are you eating? Are you sleeping? But they don't know. They're not there,
Right.
doing that for you. So you're really, really in charge of you.
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I think one of maybe the kind of emotional components is realizing your voice, right?
Yes.
So when you're in school, like when you're in high school, you have to raise your hand to go to the bathroom.
Right.
In college, you can just walk out and go, unless you're like in a test or something. But realizing that you have a little bit more power is empowering in and of itself, because you get to realize like, okay, I can be taken seriously now. And there are so many things in terms of like licenses and credit cards, all those things do matter. But on the emotional side of it, it is realizing that you have moved up a step. And at 18, you're an adult. And at 18, I felt like an adult for sure. Maybe I learned a few things along the way.
Just a couple.
But yeah, just a few things. But I had been through a lot, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have been through a lot too. And once you hit that milestone, it's going to feel good.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, because I think some of us are more of an adult at 18 than others, right? Like I grew up in a pretty idyllic way, 2-parent household. They were still married, had a little sister, upper middle class, right? And I went to college at 18 and I did not feel like an adult. Like I still call my mom for things, right? Like I just think, but not all of our students or not all of our listeners have grown up like that. And so you've had to early on take on a lot of adult responsibilities. So that is something to definitely keep in mind.
It's like a weird middle ground too, where you feel like a kid, you feel like an adult, and it's really that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Like through and through. And with imposter syndrome, it's just so hard to convince that voice in your head.
Yeah.
That what you're doing, like sometimes it feels like with imposter syndrome, some of the things you say are obvious.
Yes.
And you can't be saying something smart, right? But
Right.
that's just because you thought of it.
Yeah.
So it's already obvious,
It's obvious to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think you bring up such an important point there, Amada, because I think, and Lydia, what you're saying, like you can grow up in an environment where other people are going to be there to support every step, right? There are people who grow up like that, and you see it a lot. Like there are now people who you see that are in their mid-20s, even up into their 30s, who you're like, when are they going to grow up?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you see other people who, like there hasn't been somebody there holding their hand and guiding them what to do their whole
Right.
life. And they may already at 18 have had to figure a lot of stuff out,
Right,
on their
absolutely.
own, or maybe with somebody who wasn't necessarily their custodial parent. And I think the important thing is recognizing that is it, right? Like it's not about getting it all right. It's not about making the right choice all the time. It's about knowing that you can impact it and not just sitting around waiting for somebody to help you. And you said you feel like an adult when you were 18. I assume it's because you had to do some things on your own.
Yeah.
Right. And once you do that and get that voice, you're like, okay, I'm in charge of myself.
Right.
Right.
So kind of what are those tenets of adulthood, right? Like what makes you an adult? Obviously, they say when you're 18 you're an adult, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't really mean just because your age ticks for another 365 days, right? So like what would you say are some of those strongest tenets of adulthood?
I feel like, again, in all those different ways, and that's why it's an ongoing process, but like the ability to care for yourself. And then as you get older, possibly you're bringing more humans into that equation.
Right.
That you're caring for, partners or children or, your friend group or whatever it is. But I think that ability to know that you do have to take care of yourself first.
Right.
And figuring that out.
Yeah.
I think a big milestone is honestly a bank account.
Yeah.
Financial security and financial, like movement
Yep.
is very important to your security. And, say what you will about capitalism, whatever. But
Whatever.
this is where we live, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just think having that security net is just so important. And once you're able to have a job, that money's going to go right into your bank account. You're not going to be handed a check and then here's a whole nother thing that you have to worry about getting cash.
Right.
It's just going to be direct deposit, which is great.
Yeah. It is great.
And I think you could make a whole list of those kinds of things if you think of it from like, when did I do it myself, right? Like, getting opening a bank account, going and making your own doctor's appointment and getting yourself there.
Which I still don't like to do.
Making a big purchase, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
buying your first car if you're really buying it on your own, right? And I think there's probably a lot of those things that we could list out. And I think that for me, the thing about where's that milestone is when you face one of those new things and you think, I'm going to do it,
Right.
Yeah.
right? As opposed to who's going to do it for me. And it can be different things. Like I honestly was in my 50s before I bought myself any clothes, right? My mom bought them when I was young. Then my wife bought them. Like my kids would send me stuff. Like
Yeah.
now I've had to go to the store and figure it out, right?
Whole
And
new man.
yeah. But so they could come at any time.
Right.
But when they come, if part of being adult is even if you don't know, when you get to the point where you're like, I don't know what to do, I'm pretty confident I'm going to figure this out, even if you're terrified.
Yes.
I think that's when, for me, that's sort of when you arrive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And it's generally not when you're 18, unless
No.
you've had to do an awful lot on your
Yeah.
own,
Which a
which
lot
I
of
didn't
us
have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that's such a good point too, is it's not 100% sureness. It's just you have enough confidence to just say, you know what, I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I can ask people for advice, but they're not going to do it for me.
Right.
I'm gonna do
Absolutely.
it.
That's
Yeah,
another
right
big
on.
thing about adulthood is finding your voice enough to ask for advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not thinking you just know it.
Right.
Because there are, still to this day, again, if I have to sign up for health insurance or sign a document, I'm going to read it. Right. And then I'm going to ask somebody who knows more than me for advice
Right.
on it. Because signing your name as an adult carries a lot of weight.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
you can't go into an agreement in most states under the age of 18. So
there's a reason for that.
And I watch a lot
Yeah.
of Judge Judy, so I know that, right? So like it's really important to be aware of that. But once you're 18, if you sign something, it's a contract.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're
you have
bound.
to you're bound to
Yeah.
it. So
I have-
leases and everything.
Several stories that I know about of people that have done Greek life.
Yes.
And they did it, just right on campus. They're 18 years old. They decide to rush. And not that I was in Greek life, so I'm nothing against it, but that you then sign a contract that says you will live in the house for X amount of years. You will pay this much in dues. And your parent will not be able to get you out of that
No.
contract. Like
You're 18.
You signed it. You are 18. You will do that.
Right.
And I also think I was a little surprised when I sent my first child to college, the amount of he needs to say that you are authorized to see
Right.
this, the bill or his classes or whatever it is on his account. He has to say that it's okay for, and you're like,
Well, we've talked about that FERPA in
but-
previous episodes, but that is what it
you're
is.
the adult now
Right.
in this
it's your
equation.
decision as to who sees your information, right?
And I think that's part of maybe it's like kind of a shock test, right?
Yeah.
Where they're forcing you, the parent and the child, to now realize like this is the state of it. Like
Yeah.
when these documents are going to pop up in the future, leases, anything like a contract with a job, you, the parent, you're not going to receive these things.
Right.
Right.
So that's why you, the student, have to really be sure about what you're signing.
Yeah.
What is the paperwork that you're looking over? What are you just locking yourself into?
Exactly. Yeah. And we talk about this all the time, but find that team, right?
Yes.
Like find
Yeah.
those
Yes.
people, whether they're on campus or family friends or just someone even a couple years older than you with more life experience.
Yeah.
Like, do not go buy a car if you don't know the interest rate. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I have seen
Or what an interest rate is, right?
It is. Yeah, like be really cautious about those things. And there's so much on YouTube and out there content-wise too that you can watch. Make sure you're watching the right things, like
Yes.
Right.
this podcast.
I think
right?
you could have I think a real misconception that a lot of young people have is that, oh, I'm now an adult. I'm supposed to be able to do this on my own and not have help from other people. And I think that's where people get themselves in a lot of trouble, either making bad decisions, signing bad agreements, or just freezing up and not doing anything. When in fact, it's realizing, no, as an adult, I have the independence to be able to get opinions and get thoughts from other people, bring them in. It doesn't take away my authority. It doesn't take away my ability to make the decision, but I want to reach out to other people. And I think that really is a big adult moment when you
Yeah.
can say, I'd like your opinion on this. I'd like your help on this. And it is, I mean, unfortunately, one of the things I've seen at Give Back is there is so much predatory activity out
so
there.
much predatory lending.
Yeah, and
Yes.
and even in the places like the financial aid office that is
Right.
supposed to be on your side, like the number of agreements that you see where it's like, oh, you got this scholarship, you got this grant, and then there's this little thing called the Stafford program, right? And then and that down at the bottom it says, and you owe $0, right? And you're
Right.
like, oh, great, $0, and oops, those couple of lines mean that you owe $25,000
Exactly.
for the rest of your life.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be your parents. Like maybe
It's your Give Back coach.
Maybe it's your Give Back coach. Maybe it's a resource on
Family
campus.
friend,
Maybe it's
right.
somebody who's a couple years older and has been through it. But being able to get somebody and get their opinion and get their help, and you don't give up your own decision-making ability, but accept the help of others.
Well, that's hard. How do you strike that balance between making your own decisions and seeking advice?
I think that goes back to a big thing that Amada said of like, so being an adult means you sit with yourself and you figure out which voice is yours in there and which voice is the fear or the, anxiety talking or, whatever, and try to like separate those so that you could, what your voice sounds like. So then when you're accepting advice from people, you don't have to do what somebody is advising you to do, but you
Right.
can now put that on the table as like, okay, well, that's a possibility. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. Now, which one am I going to investigate further, or am I going to lean into, or whatever? But you have to know who you are first. And
Right.
honestly, that comes by
Trial and
probably
error.
not knowing who
Yeah.
you are a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and not all adults know everything.
No.
You know what I mean?
Very
so
few
very
do.
few. Right. So even though
In
you
fact,
may-
thinking you know everything is usually a pretty good sign that you have not
Yes.
achieved
Yes.
adulthood
Yes,
yet.
Yes.
exactly. If you have a family friend who's living paycheck to paycheck and really struggling financially, they may not be your key to
Right.
financial wellness, right? And that's okay. Doesn't mean that they're not brilliant about other aspects
Right.
of life.
And by the same token, your
Yes.
super rich uncle that seems like they're
100%.
living high on the hog might not be either.
Right.
Like that is where you have to have some discernment of like,
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
who's making smart decisions
Mm-hmm. Period.
in what I want to make a smart decision in.
Right.
I'm going to talk to them.
Yeah.
Something that I think is really interesting, and Amada, you said, sit with yourself and find your voice. I'm interested in this day and age. It seems to me harder than probably ever before to actually just sit with yourself. Right? There's so many things that can distract you. There's so many different ways that you can not have to sit and just kind of think. And I wonder for younger people, like for me, I did a lot of stuff outdoors.
Right.
In the days before cell phones. So like if you're on a 2-mile hike, there's really nothing to do besides hike. But I don't know how young people do that today. So I'm interested, like, how do you find time to have that kind of insight?
Well, I'm a hiker too.
Okay.
Okay.
So that is when it happens, is like in nature. But truth be told, it can be a little scary to just sit there with my brain. I'm sure it's the same for a few other people. But you do have to force yourself, like in the shower, is just one example I can think of, right? Don't even put on any music. Just sit there with your thoughts. And if they're loud and if they're screaming at you, then listen to them. Like, what are they trying to tell you? And what fears are being revealed in that? You know what I mean? And it can be a scary thing, but it's one that you do have to at some point force yourself to undergo.
I think that's just such great advice because, I mean, if you don't know, if you haven't had a chance to sit by yourself and think, what do I believe? What do I stand for? What's important to me? Then like you don't have that core, and anything could get at you, right? So I mean, even like the 10 minutes in a shower with your thoughts instead of with music is just a great idea.
Well, and I think we've had, during that transition, because college is a whole nother world, right? Like you're not as scheduled and you're not, so it's kind of an accountability thing too, right? Like in terms of nobody's telling you what you should think. Nobody's telling you every day, right? And maybe they are. And maybe that's a boundary that you have to make too, where, you've listened to the adults in your life over and over again your entire life. Well, maybe college is your time to really be able to think on your own, right? And determine what's important to you. And I think everyone should do that.
Absolutely.
Right. Just because like my mom says salsa is picati. So when I went to college, I asked for picati on my taco. Okay. Not only was it embarrassing, but that's not what salsa is called. Okay. But she just always called it that. Right. So I had to learn that it is salsa. Right. Like, and that's such a silly thing, but
It's
like
not though. I think that's a big part of like the whole beginning of college is
Right.
like your eyes kind of get open to all of these concepts that you're like,
yes.
and sometimes it's as innocuous as
It's something so
salsa,
silly,
like,
right.
whatever,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's something really big, like a core belief that
Yes.
was really not yours, but you just
It's
that's
just
what it was in
culturally
your
in that-
family
Right.
or
Yes.
in your
Yeah.
environment or whatever, and now you go forward, and now you're kind of standing on this campus where the whole world is open to you, and there's everybody here, and like you're really exposed to so much more than you maybe were in your own home environment, and like, yeah, you got to really like think about what.
And not every adult is right.
No.
And not every adult is right for you, right? I mean,
Correct.
that's the thing, is also realizing that adults make mistakes and adults say things wrong, and that's
Well, I
okay.
think one of the most important things is realizing that people make mistakes.
Yes.
Right. I mean, I remember going through some family counseling when my kids were young, and my now ex-wife and I came into some pretty big disagreements about parenting, and she came to the point of view that, she'd made some decisions that she'd like to change. And the therapist was like, she's like, what do I do? How do I do this? And he's like, don't you think it might be beneficial for your kids to see that sometimes adults make mistakes and they can
Right.
change their mind? Right. And I think that sense, like, I think there's this mystery where young people feel like an adult is infallible, right?
Right.
Like you have to be infallible. And gosh, that's so untrue, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think maybe you're an adult when you get to the point you realize I can make mistakes and I'll figure out how to fix them. But there's no switch where it's like, oh, now I know what to do. Like I still have things I don't know what to do.
You don't
Yeah.
get a manual.
Yeah, there was a moment, I think I was probably like 18 or 19, where I realized I was kind of like thinking about my parents and also kind of in relation to myself, how I am still growing and changing as a person, but here I am as an adult, right?
Right.
And then I kind of had this realization like, oh, adults are constantly growing, even just as kids are.
Yes.
Like emotionally, mentally, just maturing as time goes on. And that to me kind of changed a lot of my mindset about some of the things that I experienced like as a kid, and realizing like, okay, maybe you just still had a lot of growing to do.
Yeah.
You know?
I saw this thing on TikTok and it was like to think about your mom or your parent or caregiver that they're going through it for the first time too.
Yeah.
You know, like they've never had that day before either. So how would they be able to know so much more than you? You know what I mean? Because every
Yes.
day is so new and fresh and different, and maybe they've never been a parent before, or they've never had a child like that of you, right? I
Right.
mean, so I think it is important to realize that adults are not infallible.
Yeah.
But I think a big adult tenet is knowing that you can be wrong and knowing how to fix
how to
it.
say that
and how to verbalize it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's a huge adult thing. Actually, I was just thinking like, you know, being older and like I've had a lot of life changes in the last, 4 years. And I just think of the number of times that I've gone to my kids and said, we're learning together.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we're going to, figure this out together and like, we'll be okay. But I don't know what I'm doing either.
Right.
So let's figure out our resources.
And having that honesty.
Yeah, I think it's really
matters.
important. And I was thinking like when you're young and you're looking for a mentor, you're looking for someone that you can kind of follow or ask questions to or whatever. Really, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but ask the people that are saying, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Because those are your ones that are going to go figure it out.
Right.
Like the people who are like, okay, let's
That's
go.
a really good question.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's figure that out together.
Let's go on this journey together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I think something that you can do is, it might not have a ton of application, but a good way to practice asking questions is by email or
Yes.
text. If you are too nervous with your voice,
Yes.
like send an email. And even better yet, I think sending that email to put a time for a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you lock into that meeting, you're gonna be much more likely to go. And
Yes.
when you're sitting down in front of that person, whether it's a professor or whoever you need that advice from or your questions answered, it's just going to be you two,
Yes.
and nobody else.
Yeah.
And
Right.
there's so much less pressure on you to get anything out that you need to.
Well, and if you go to office hours or something, you're expecting someone to come in right behind you, or that you may feel rushed, or you know what I mean. But when you set that appointment and that person makes time in their day and you make time in your day, it is that you feel a lot more comfortable. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about this because I just saw The Wizard of Oz this last weekend.
Yes.
But the word that's just popping in my head is the courage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so many of these things, if you haven't done them before, it's so scary. Like
Yeah.
what could go wrong? And if you let your mind go down that path, it's huge amounts of things that could go wrong. Right. But it is like, how do you put yourself in the point where you have the courage to try it? Right. And in that, in that play, right, it's not when the wizard finally gives him courage. It's not that he suddenly has courage. He has this medal that he gives him so that other people think he has courage. Right. And so I think for young people, one of the things that can really help if you're trying to figure out, well, how do I get up that courage? Whether it's a little thing like making an appointment with a professor, or a big thing like I've got to figure out how to tell my roommate I don't want to room with him next year, or whatever that might be. So often, if you go back and look at what are the other challenges that I've had and that I've been able to overcome, and sort of take an inventory of those things, and maybe with Give Back, talk to your coach about those things, all of those are the building blocks that make it, make you okay to go out and do it on your own, right?
Yes.
Like, so if you, for you, Amada, you said maybe writing an email or sending a text is easier than picking up the phone the first time, right? Excellent thing to know, and a building block.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're emailing somebody back and forth 10 times and you realize it's working fine, then, maybe you'll shout hello to them across the campus or
right,
something like that.
right.
So-
Yeah. So college obviously has a ton of resources on the campus for you to learn how to adult. A lot of them have credit unions or banking places. They have the career services. You have your success coaches, things like that. But then you graduate. And I think that's where it like gets really scary, right? Like what's next? So where do you go after college to get those resources?
Well, maybe we should even just start before that and say, what are some of the things you should know before you graduate college,
yeah, that's
right?
true.
Like,
That transition.
so because you have those resources. So for example,
Yeah.
like if you have had a job on campus,
Mm-hmm.
go find somebody at the college that can help you understand what's on your paycheck.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a big
Right?
one.
Because if you
Yes.
don't know what's coming out of your paycheck, then you're not really
Right. Yeah.
It's very frightening, that
yeah,
first
and
check.
like I mean, so things that when there are people to do
Yeah.
those kinds of things, and so many people don't do it, but those resources are there. So, writing a resume.
Yes.
You should not leave college without having a resume. Most people do, but you
Right.
shouldn't, because somebody will help you write the whole darn thing.
Right.
Knowing what's on your paycheck, right? Understanding, having a bank account.
Yep.
Right? Don't leave college without a bank account. Have somebody help you open a bank account. It's going to be easier then than
Right.
any other time.
Yep.
Things like practice interviews,
Yes.
right? Or learning, how am I supposed to dress for different interviews, right? Hopefully, how do I use the internet to search for things? But what would be some other things that come to mind, like for you, especially as a younger person, but maybe Shannon, as you counsel kids and coach kids, what are some other things they should
I feel
do
like
before
there's
they
a
leave?
lot of practical things too, like how to cook 2 to 3 meals
Yeah.
Right.
for yourself that you can, budget a grocery list and make sure you have those things
How to
in
budget.
your house all the time. How to
Yes,
budget.
Yeah.
How to, like where's the cleaning? I just went back, sorry, friend that I'm about to call out, but I just went back to school shopping with one of my children, and we're in the cleaning aisle and you're looking at it like, well, what's that? What is that?
one's which?
What do I do? What am
Yeah.
I getting? Like just knowing like the different ins and outs of things, like when to use bleach, when to use detergent, when do you I
Rarely
think
use
by the
bleach.
time don't use
Don't
bleach.
mix.
Can you
those
take me
things.
to
Yeah.
after we're
You
done
wanna
here?
go
Can you
to-
take me to the store and teach me
Right,
that
we
stuff?
can do that.
Don't mix bleach with other household chemicals.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
right.
but like,
Yeah.
different
really,
things like
yeah.
that, or like, oh, I've got like soap scum in my shower. Like, what am I going to do? Just the practical things. And you have resources for that. But like, as you're coming up, junior, senior year of college, maybe just making sure that you have the capability to take care of yourself.
I had a college student I coached who wasn't, and again, this happens. This is very normal, right? Doing laundry for the first time on your own. They didn't realize the difference in like a laundry detergent and fabric softener. So they just used fabric softener,
Yeah.
right?
Everything smells.
Everything
Save a step.
smells, right? But is it clean? Right? Like, so we had to learn that.
Yeah.
We learned it together, and we're using Tide, right? Moving
Love.
forward, and that's wonderful. But if you never did your own laundry, how do you know that?
But I think like
It's not instinctual.
It's not
no,
instinctual.
you don't.
Right, right.
Suddenly
You're
you're
just
ready
born like a
at
baby
9.
giraffe.
You're-
Like you just know
Your
how to
caveman
walk.
brain knows how to wash clothes.
Right, right.
Well, and if you think about some of the aisles in the grocery store and like Target or whatever, and you're like, I've never gone down that aisle before.
right. Why would you?
Take a gander.
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
a little trip down there
Yeah.
and just start like, again, Google is at your fingertips to be like, what's the difference between Tide Pods and Downy?
Yeah.
You'll find out real quick.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a learning process
Mm-hmm.
too. I just moved into an apartment and I keep shocking myself at the different products that I'm missing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think overall it's really important to know and define to yourself like what are wants and what are needs.
Yes.
One thing that I notice a lot of people my age fall for are they feel a need is like different things in video games.
Sure.
Like a skin in Fortnite, is that a need?
I don't know. My son
don't
would say
know.
yes.
Right. But it's not.
Right. You're right. You're right.
And not when you have certain responsibilities. And that's when
Yes.
it really does matter is when you can tell yourself and list yourself like these responsibilities, then it becomes so much more pressing
Yes.
to really, take care of your needs first, take care of your wants too.
Right.
Because both of those things are important for your happiness.
If you don't pay your rent, you're going to get evicted.
Yeah.
yeah.
And that is a legal issue, right?
Yes.
So it's going to be on your record. So then go try to rent another apartment with an
Right.
eviction, right?
Right.
Like, or you don't pay your car note and they repo your car. That doesn't mean it's just okay. No, you
No, your
can't go buy a
credit
new
is-
car.
yeah.
Your credit's shot. Plus, you're going to pay the difference in what they're able to sell that car for, right? So you're still going to owe money. It's still going to come on your credit report. It's still going to be this debt. And I think, again, that's adulting, right? You learn, but that's when you ask.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've listed a couple things that I think are good, whether you're either still in school or when you're getting out to get the help, right?
Yes.
So looking at your leases,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Looking at what are you signing when you sign a car note,
Right.
right? Insurance, I think, is one that's,
Huge.
like, I think now there's a mandate that like you have to have insurance, like your IRS they'll check it, but it's very easy to not have insurance.
Absolutely.
Right. Especially when you're young and healthy and you don't have health
And
insurance.
it's expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's
Yeah.
health insurance, life insurance, all these different things. Like, find somebody to talk to about those things, and you don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
But it really can be helpful if you have resources where you can find out about those things. And I think maybe more important than anything else, don't make those decisions without having somebody else help you.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's the biggest deal too is we've talked about this, just ask for help. Because if it's it's everyone's first time, right? At something.
Yeah.
And it's everyone buys a car for the first time. Everyone rents an apartment for the first time. Everyone's gone through that. So knowing that and knowing that other people want to help you is a really big deal.
Yep.
And I think it's a little tidbit that I would have for people like me who are still on their parents' insurance. Just remind yourself one day that's going to run out. You're going to
26.
age out of that at
Right.
26. So hopefully you can have a job that is able to give that to you. But there are other options too.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm still on my dad's health insurance,
Milk
but
it.
I am freaking out
Yeah.
because time is running short.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have car insurance, and
Yeah.
not all car insurance is the same,
No.
right? Like, it's not all built the same, and
No.
you have deductibles. I mean, there's a lot of things that are very complicated, right?
Very complicated.
And it comes at you very quickly, and then you have to make these decisions. And so, again, as we're talking, this is a lot of stuff that Give Back does on a daily basis. This is a lot of stuff we look at with students. I know we've looked at car insurance options with kids. We've looked at health insurance. We've discussed those opportunities. And so if you have questions, leave them in the chat. Let us know what your questions are about that. If you're about to sign a new apartment lease and you're worried, what's a good interest rate on a car? Well, it's not 25%. I'll tell you that, right? Like, so, there's definitely ways that we can discuss that with you and talk about what's a good interest rate today, where that was very different a few years ago, right? And so it's ever changing, but it is something that we want to help you with. It's something we want to maybe have future podcasts around. So please leave those in the comments so that we can discuss those with y'all.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that just reach out to whatever resources. And we have so many people. One of the things that's great about what we can do at Give Something Back is, like, if you want to get some ideas or advice from somebody who's in their 50s, you can. But if you want to talk to somebody who's in their 20s and has just gone through it or is going through it, you can do that too.
Sign their first
Right.
lease.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. So no, I think that's great. And there's content everywhere, right? But you have to be really cautious. We talked about this last night at dinner.
Yeah.
There's so much content that comes at you that it's hard to know how to trust.
Yes.
Right? Like, I can type in the search bar, is Tylenol good for my headache? And
you will find
every
every answer.
answer under the sun,
possible.
right?
Yes.
Somebody
Yeah.
will say Tylenol will make your liver explode, and then there'll be the next article is Tylenol is great, is perfect, eat
Right.
it every day, right?
Right.
Like, so you really have to know what you're watching and who you can
Yeah.
Yeah,
trust.
and that's
Yes.
discernment. Like,
Yes.
like
Yes.
you said, like, it is just so important. I don't know how that's something that's learned, really. I think it's a little instinctual, that discernment. Trust your gut,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
I trust your gut.
Yeah.
Well, and discernment's a soft skill, right? And so
Yeah.
we've talked
Yeah.
a lot about, like, practical, like what you need to know to be an adult, or how to, open your bank account, things like that. But what are some soft skills that you need to know to be an adult in this
adult?
world? Yeah.
I think the phone call thing, like call your own doctor's appointments, like do that kind of stuff. That's such a hard thing to do.
Yes.
And like, I know even as a parent, like turning that over to them, because what I found I was doing was like, when is your schedule? Okay, then I'll call. And then, no, that doesn't work. And then like,
You don't need a middleman.
yeah, I'm getting out of
Yeah.
this.
Right.
Like you're old enough now that you know your own schedule and you can take care of it yourself. It's much easier, but it is very daunting to get on the phone, with people, I think a lot. But again, that's like a lifelong skill to
Communication. Yeah.
I think that's huge.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, and
that's
if I can,
just-
I really believe this to be true. Like we have, and I'm sure some of the people we're talking to are the people who missed a couple years of high school or a couple years of college because of the pandemic, right? And that's bad,
Yeah.
right? But also some of the skills that are learned during that, like the fact that you know how to take classes online, you know how to have conversations with your professor, you know how to have friends online, you know how to interact with people without ever going into an office. I mean, those are really important skills those are challenges for me.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like a complete natural thing for my
Absolutely.
young people. So, the growing up with native technology of these apps.
Yeah.
Right. And knowing how to do the search and with AI and all those things, those are going to be advantages for young people.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I wasn't in school when the whole AI thing started, and that flew by me.
Yeah.
And it's pretty funny how quickly technology keeps evolving, because 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds of today, give it 12 years, there's going to be something new that we literally could never dream of that is
Right.
going to fly by you, or
Right.
you're going to have a really good grasp on it.
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting, but it's also, it's a little scary to kind of think of. But I think overall, I think one of the things that I always kind of held on to was just being open to new perspectives.
Yes. Be open.
I went to the same private school for 12 years. So I only heard one perspective the whole time. So when I went to college, this was something we were kind of talking about before, where you see an entire world, literally, a tapestry in front of you. And all you can do is either be open to it or you're going to be closed to it. And, I chose the route of being open to it. And it was vivid.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And to learn these new perspectives in, say, philosophy class. And these are things I would have never heard before. It's fascinating.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So if you're in a private school, hold on. Just hold on.
The world's
There's
coming
more
for
out
you.
there.
Yeah,
Right.
and you might look back on it fondly too,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
if you hate it right now.
Absolutely. So our quick question is from Jerry from New Jersey, who says, I feel like a huge step into adulthood is your first job. How do I get that?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
Jerry. Jerry, right? Like there's so many opportunities.
There are. And I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things that seems a lot bigger and a lot scarier
Yeah.
than it probably is, because we have a coach that actually, when she does her resume building seminars, she'll start, and this is with younger people, like early high school, she'll do this. And she'll say, well, let's talk about all the jobs you've already had. And they're like, what? I've never had a job. And it's like, oh, well, have you ever taken care of younger siblings or cousins? She's like, okay, well, that's childcare.
Yeah.
Right? Have you ever had to make food for yourself? Well, that's food prep. Like, have you ever mowed the lawn? Well, that's landscaping, right?
Right.
And so I think, there are, in fact, a lot of things that people are doing that are part of the economy, right? But that step to actually getting a job and having to, and getting a paycheck and all that is really, really a big deal. And I think the most important, in my mind, and
Right.
I know you'll all have your own opinions, but I think the most important thing is just start, right? Like maybe you take a crummy job that doesn't pay that much, and you don't even like it, but now you've had a job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because the number one thing that employers want to know is that you've had a job before. And the reason they do that is because they don't want to teach you that they don't want to have to be the ones to teach you that if we start at 9, that you have to be here at 10 minutes till 9, right?
Yeah.
You have to be in your uniform at your station at 9 o'clock, right? They don't want to teach you that your pants need to be pulled up. They don't want to teach you that, you can't be on your cell phone the whole time. If a
Right.
customer asks you a stupid question, you don't say, that was a stupid question. You say, sure, I can help you with that, right? They don't want to teach you that stuff, right?
Right.
And so finding something, and then how do you find something? Well, look back at what you've done,
Yep.
right? And be prepared to talk about what you've done.
Yes.
And so if you can go to somebody and say, I have this experience doing these things, and here's what I've learned, that'll make a big difference when you get started.
Yeah, I think we'll end on that. I think that was solid
Yeah.
advice, and I think if you need more than that, if you need resume help, if you need interview prep, if you want someone to just look over, the things that you've done and try to help you create a portfolio, right? Because people are doing LinkedIn profiles now, younger and younger. They're creating personal websites that are how they're showcasing themselves for a new job. Let us know. And not only that, but we want to learn from you.
Yeah.
So if you have a great website or you have a great resume, send it to us. Like, I would love to look at it. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. I know we all would. So please keep leaving those comments and questions below. We're really excited about the podcast. We're going to keep this up. And so thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to our panel, and we'll see you next time.
Our coaches at Give Something Back are here as a resource to help guide you through your college journey. To contact us with any questions you might have or to apply to a Give Something Back program, go to giveback.ngo and fill out the form at the bottom of our homepage. Additionally, you could DM us through Instagram or through Facebook, or you could email us at info@giveback.ngo. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you next time.